So I want to talk about a video that has been deleted from YouTube, and that was one of the most interesting videos that I ever saw, and it's about the Kennedy assassination. And if that's too conspiracy theory for you, then please, this video is not for you. So there was a man who wanted to write a book. His name was Joe West. He wanted to write a book about the Kennedy assassination, and he got, after a few years, he got an anonymous tip from an FBI guy to visit a man in prison who supposedly knows a lot about that subject. And so I cannot remember his Italian name. He changed his name. The guy in prison changed his name to James Files, Files, James Files. And this video is no longer available on YouTube. You may be able to find like 5-minute clips or so, but the entire video was several hours long. And I watched the thing because it was so unbelievable what this guy knew. He like sketched Dealey Plaza from memory. He said he worked for the Nicolettis, he was a mobster. And the story that he told, what happened to him, is maybe too much for many people to accept that here. So please, the interview with him is like, I don't know, 3.5 hours long, or 3 hours 50 minutes, something like that. The guy who made the interview so it begins like this: Joe West visits him in prison because he gets this anonymous tip, and this guy doesn't talk, and so he has to get like comfortable with him and so on. And when that happened, he began to talk, and he sketched, it's about the Kennedy assassination. So stupid flies. So anyway, he went there the second or third day to visit him, and he sketched Dealey Plaza from memory. He said he was there in 1969 when Kennedy was shot, and he was one of the shooters. So if you watch the Zapruder film, how many shots do you hear? At least 5 or 6, and there might be 1 or 2 shots simultaneously fired. He said there were 6 shooters and him. He was like Dealey Plaza was. They had 6 assassins there, and they were flown in from Cuba. And this all happened after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So anyway, Joe West visits him in prison. He begins to talk, and this guy who writes the book has some operation in a hospital, heart operation, and he heard that he's doing fine. He had the operation, everything is alright, he's on the road to recovery, and he wants to meet with him again, and suddenly he dies from complications. So, and the story that he told was absolutely incredible. So he didn't really get to tell the story to Joe West, and he had so much information that he could have had the body of JFK exhumed to look for mercury in the head shot, because he said they used what's called like explosive ammunition, where you drill a hole and you put like a little bit of mercury into that hole and close it with a wax, and this the mercury would be faster than the bullet, and the bullet would like explode the second it hits something. It explodes. And so he had that, and he knew about that, and he wanted the body exhumed to look for mercury, and suddenly he dies. So then there was a guy, a filmmaker, who went to interview him, and he made the interview with him after all that stuff happened. And he said that the hit on JFK was made by the mafia, and when the Warren Commission was over, people had a lot of questions, because the shooter was immediately killed, and the guy who killed him was also a mobster, and he immediately died of cancer. Like, he was like eaten up by cancer, like he died before he could hold. He wanted to hold a press conference to explain his motives, and I think his name was starts with an R, so Ruby, his last name was Ruby. So, and this guy then dies after he killed the supposed gunman of JFK, before he could say anything. But if you look at what he said when the cameras were on him, he is always screaming, "I'm just a patsy, I'm just a patsy, I'm just a fall guy." It goes way up, it goes way up. I didn't do it. So he always said he was a patsy. And the Warren Commission, which was headed by Allen Dulles. So Allen Dulles was the CIA director, and John F. Kennedy vowed to destroy and splinter the CIA in 1,000 pieces, because it was so corrupt. So the story that James Files told explains everything. It explains why they did never find the supposed gunman on the grassy knoll. They always said the kill shot, the headshot must have come from the grassy knoll, because the supposed gunman was behind him, but his head was pushed backwards by the force of the bullet. So you could see that he was hit from the front, not from behind. The official theory was that a bullet that he shot ricocheted off something and then made a U-turn 180 degrees and shot him from the front in the head. That's the official version of the Warren Commission. And this place where he shot from, I never can remember his name. I always confuse him with Timothy McVeigh. So his name was Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald. And he shot with like a bent old rifle. He shot like a 450 meters, and the bullet supposedly ricocheted off a building and went into the front of JFK's head. That's the official version of the Warren Commission, because it's obvious when you watch the Zapruder film that he was shot from the front, because his head was pushed back violently, and the first shot hit him there, so there were 2 shots. And you can see him grabbing his throat before he was hit in the head. So this guy said that there was no shooter on the grassy knoll. The last shooter shot from under where the sewage tunnels are, under the street. There are the sewage tunnels, and the canal where the water on the street runs into, and they shot from beneath upwards, and he wasn't further away than a few meters. And if you watch the Zapruder film, you see that his head is pushed backwards and up. So, and they used explosive ammunition. So, and this guy, he survived, I don't know, 3 assassination attempts. He was hit by a car when he was riding a motorcycle. He was nearly shot without cause by 2 policemen. He survived that. Then he was when he was still yet not in prison, he was somebody sprayed something into his face. He was unconscious. He came to. He was in a basement, and he was tortured, and they thought that he was dead, and he was found by police. They thought he was dead, and he came to when they already called his wife that he had died, and they brought him to a hospital. James Files. I think his Italian name was something like Nicoletti, something like that. I'm not sure. So it's an unbelievable story, and I just wanted to talk about that because it's deleted from YouTube. So there is basically like something like the National Security Act for YouTube now. They're deleting all these conspiracy theory videos, but this guy talked for 5 hours or 4 hours, and if you look at his body language, he's not inventing stories. He's talking about something that he hasn't talked about for 30 years, and you see it in his face that, you know, when you talk from memory, you usually, when you're right-handed, you look right hand down when you're accessing memory, and you look left way up if you're inventing stories. So this guy obviously did not invent stories, and you can't find it anymore. You can find little 5-minute pieces of the video, and of course these small pieces make it look ridiculous, but this guy, he told his whole life story, and he survived many attempts on his life, and I think he's still alive, and he got 50 years because he was the last assassination attempt was from police, and the second guy who was still around, so all the big shots, the mafia big shots, Sam Giancana, another one was Rosselli, that were high up in the mafia, they were killed because obviously they were involved, and there are whole books just about the Sam Giancana story and why he was murdered suddenly, because he was like a mob boss, and he was murdered. So that doesn't happen every day. So and a lot of, after these the second official investigation started into the JFK story, suddenly all these mob guys were killed, and in the end there were 2 guys left. One of which was James Files, and his partner gave him basically what should have been his life insurance, which was a file, a diary, where all the mob hits from the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years in that area where they were written down. That should have been his life insurance, and he told him to keep watch on it. And then this guy was killed, and so basically they tried to kill him several times, and in the end police were involved in trying. Basically they pulled him over like a normal traffic stop and began to shoot into his car or whatever, and he managed to get away with a rifle, and he shot back, and that was enough to put him behind bars for 50 years. And all the people on the jury were like ex-cops and wives of cops and so on, so he went to prison for 50 years. And I think he's still alive, but he does not talk anymore. So he gave one interview where he said, "The last shot did not come from the grassy knoll. The last shot came from the sewage tunnels beneath the street. And if you watch the Zapruder movie, you see that his head is pushed back and upward, the kill shot." So and I never talked about it because it sounds too crazy, but if you look at what YouTube is doing, they're deleting all these videos, they're taking down all these what is against their community guidelines. So I don't know why that, if that's just a fairy tale, why is that against the community guidelines? And everything he said checks out, and so it's just like Wikipedia is the free encyclopedia. I don't think so. And YouTube too, it's getting worse and worse. And all these videos that used to completely astound me, because if somebody lies, you see it in his face, especially if he's talking for hours on end. And this guy did not lie, in my opinion. So maybe you can find it. Thank you for listening.